Yo, what's going on? So today I wanted to talk about how to make beats like one of my favorite newer producers, Kaytranada. If you haven't listened to Kaytranada, you need to. He makes sick beats, kind of like house slash hip hop influenced. I find he's got a very unique style and it's really refreshing to see. Just to preface this, Kaytranada does have a number of different beat making styles. Some of his beats are really quick, some of them are a bit more on the slow side. Some of them are more house influenced, some of them are more hip hop, but I'm going to be trying to emulate that sound that he does when it's usually like a gold link beat. It's kind of like a dancey vibe, but could still potentially be rapped on. So the 3 tips that we're going to be going through to make a beat like Kaytranada, and we'll go through them more in depth, is 1, you want to lead with your bass line. 2, you want to have a 4 on the floor beat, but have some variation to it. And then 3, you want to have sidechained chords. So the first thing we want to do is we want to lead with our bass line. And you'll notice in a lot of Kaytranada's beats, whether or not they're sample-based or synth-based, the bass line in the tracks are always super strong, and I find a lot of the time they really carry the track. So to be recording the bass line, I'm going to be using the Novation Peak. I've got a really basic bass sound kind of queued up, so you could use a sample, you could use a DAW, you can get a sound really similar to this using any sort of piece of gear. I also did a video specifically talking about how to make bass lines right here, so if you're having trouble developing something, you can check that out and see if it helps. But one thing I always try to do when I'm making a beat like Kaytranada is you want to make sure that your bass line is at least probably 4 bars. You don't just want it to be single notes going through, and you want to make sure that you have some variation in terms of the texture of the bass line, meaning you don't just want to be playing one note over and over again or maybe 2 notes. Every bar should have a couple notes peppered in and just have a little bit of variation. And you also want to make sure that you sort of utilize silence in your bass lines so that they have a little bit of bounce. You don't just want to have those single sort of notes like sort of sitting in the back, because by doing that it really does sit in the back. So the first thing I'm going to do before we record in the bass line is I'm just going to lay down some kick drums. This way we'll have sort of a metronome that we can use to record the bass line on top of. So I'll set the BPM to 110 and then just record in 4 bars of just that basic kick drum beat. Let's do it. And I did record that kick drum in quantized just because, again, I do want to use it as the metronome for when I'm recording the bass line. So if we want it to sound a little bit more off, we can change that afterwards. So now when we're making our bass line, we want to make sure it has a lot of hop to it. So by that, I mean we want some really snappy notes. And when you come up with the patch for the bass sound, if you're using a synth, you want to make sure it has a decent amount of high end, because like I said, we really want this bass line to sort of carry the beat a little bit. So you don't want it to be filtered too low, because if it is, it might not really stand out in the song. So this is the bass patch that I came up with to use for this track. As you can hear, it's got a lot of high end, like I said, and it's still got that kind of punch at the beginning, and then the filter turns back down. And you can do that with the mod envelope. Also, let me know down below if you'd be interested in seeing any videos on how to design bass patches, because I've been working with the Peak and I really love the workflow on it, so let me know down below. But with all that said, let's lay down the bass line. I'm controlling the Peak with the MPC ONE, and I've just got the pad performance mode on, so everything I play is going to be in the key of F. Let's do it. Okay, I really like the way that bass line turned out, and actually turned up the BPM to 114. I just think it gets us a little bit closer to that sort of danceable range. 110 I just felt was a bit slow, so we sped that up. But now I'm going to record that bass line from the Peak directly onto the MPC. That way we can have it as an audio file in the track. Okay, now that we have that bass line laid down, we want to move on to step 2, which is we want to do a 4 on the floor beat with variations. A 4 on the floor beat, in case you haven't heard of it before, is kind of like a classic electronic beat in which you have the kick drum going on every beat, every quarter note, and then the snare or clap or whatever you're using as a snare sound going on every half note. So it sounds something like this. And that's used in a lot of house music, a lot of electronic music, and even some hip-hop music as well. So the first thing we can do is lay down that classic 4 on the floor beat onto our beat, and then from there we can add in that variation that I was talking about, and we can get into that a little bit more. So now that we have that 4 on the floor beat recorded, we want to start adding some variation. So that means we can add in a couple of sort of pickup kick notes, as well as just some different percussion that will match the beat well, as well as just kind of go in those off the grid moments. And you notice in a lot of Kaytranada's beats, if there is a 4 on the floor beat used, there's a lot of sort of different elements used on the off beats, different types of percussion. It doesn't necessarily have to be like a hi-hat or even a shaker. It could just be any sort of sound, and you'll hear that sort of unique percussion in a lot of his tracks. So let's see if we can do that as well. So let's start off with the kick drum, like I said, and we can just add in a couple of additional kicks off of just the quarter notes that we currently have. Let's see what we can come up with. So now it's the second element to add in some more variation to this beat. I'm actually going to add a shaker, but I'm not going to do any sort of consistent pattern. I'm going to try to just mix it up and see how I feel, and then see what comes out of it. So I really like the way those shakers turned out, and you'll notice that I didn't actually do any of the shakers on those downbeats. I kind of kept them all on sort of the off rhythms, and I think it just gave it a real sort of swing and a real dancey sound. So now let's add a few more little pieces of percussion just to add to the nuance of the drums that we have. Let's do it. Alright, I like where these drums are at so far, but now I think we can move on to the next step, which is you want to have sidechained chords. If you listen to some of Kaytranada's production, you'll notice that there's a lot of sidechaining, and we definitely want to take advantage of that if we want to try to make a beat sound like a beat of his. So I'm going to add in some chords from the peak, and then I'm going to sidechain those to the kick, and you'll get a really good sense of what that can achieve. Let's do it. So now that I've added in those side-chained chords, I now just want to finish off this beat with a couple of textures, because similar to the percussion, we want to make sure that we have some sort of textures and things that change rather than just that simple chord pattern. So I'll add in those textures, and I think this beat will be in a pretty good spot. Let's do it. Alright, so I hope you liked how this beat turned out, and I hope it gave you some good ideas and inspiration on how to make beats like Kaytranada. If you liked the video, make sure you give it a thumbs up and let me know in the comments what you want to see in a future video. Thank you so much. Love you guys.